You're standing in a private banking suite you didn't know existed until this morning, looking at a screen that shows a balance of $1 trillion sitting in an account that appeared in your name overnight. It's attached to a single condition, delivered by a lawyer you've never met and can't seem to find any public record of afterward. Spend the entire balance to zero within 7 days, or whatever remains unspent converts in full into a debt owed by you. Not a debt paid in money. A debt paid in you. The lawyer doesn't explain further, and something about the way he says it makes you understand you're not meant to ask. You laugh when you first hear it, the way anyone would laugh at a number that large attached to a threat that vague. You stop laughing somewhere around day 3. The first thing you do, before you've even touched the money, is call Marcus. He's the only person in your life boring enough, level-headed enough, to help you think instead of panic. Marcus runs a modest accounting practice out of a strip mall office, the kind of guy who still balances his own checkbook by hand out of habit. When you tell him the number, he goes quiet for almost 30 seconds before saying the sentence that ends up haunting the rest of your week. You can't actually spend that. Not for real. Not in 7 days. He asks you carefully who the lawyer was. You don't have a name. He asks if you got anything in writing. You did. But when you try to read it back to him over the phone, entire sections of the contract seem to rearrange themselves under your eyes, like the document doesn't want to be summarized out loud. Marcus tells you to be careful, tells you to call him if anything gets strange, and you tell him you will. You don't call him again for the rest of the week. There isn't time, and somewhere underneath that excuse is the truth, which is that some part of you already understands this isn't a problem Marcus can help you solve. You don't believe him yet. You start big, the way anyone would. You call a real estate developer and offer $2.1 billion, cash, for an entire luxury tower still under construction in Miami. All 400 units, sight unseen. The developer, stunned, agrees within the hour. On your way out of the meeting, you stop at a dealership and buy the entire showroom floor. 11 cars, hypercars mostly, a Bugatti Chiron, 2 Koenigsegg's, a Pagani Huayra, a handful of vintage Ferraris the owner had been sitting on for a decade. $94 million total, paid before lunch. You've spent $2.2 billion in half a day. At that pace, you calculate, giddy, you could clear $1 trillion in about 8 days. The math feels almost embarrassingly simple. You don't yet understand that the tower and the cars were the easy part. The next morning, the market pushes back. You try to buy a controlling stake in a mid-cap public company, planning to write a check for $4 billion and take it private by the end of the afternoon. Your broker explains, patiently, the thing you didn't know you didn't know. Buying stock at that volume doesn't happen at the price you see on the screen. The moment your buy order hits the market, the price starts climbing against you in real time because you are the demand. And demand that large moves the number it's chasing. What should have cost $4 billion ends up costing $5.8 billion by the time the position closes. And even then, regulators flag the transaction for review, because acquiring more than a certain percentage of a public company triggers disclosure requirements that can take weeks, not hours, to clear. Weeks you do not have. You pivot to private companies instead. A regional airline outright for $9.4 billion. A chain of hospitals for $12.7 billion. A professional sports franchise for $6.3 billion. A mid-size cruise line for $7.1 billion. Mostly because the seller happens to answer his phone that afternoon. You buy out an entire vineyard region in Napa, 42 individual estates, $2.8 billion, and a watch manufacturer in Switzerland outright, $1.4 billion, along with its entire inventory of finished pieces, several hundred watches you'll never wear sitting in a vault you now own. Each purchase eats days of due diligence you don't have time for. Each seller's lawyers moving at a pace built for a world where trillion-dollar deadlines don't exist. By the end of the second day, you've spent $47.9 billion. You are under 5% of the way there, with 5 days left. The third day, you pivot toward giving it away, reasoning that generosity should move faster than acquisition. No due diligence, no regulatory review, just a wire transfer and gratitude on the other end. You pledge $50 billion to a coalition of the largest charitable foundations in the country in a single afternoon, expecting the number to simply leave your account. Instead, you learn that foundations of that size have absorption limits, internal governance rules, legal requirements, practical capacity constraints that prevent them from accepting or deploying 9 and 10-figure sums instantly, no matter how badly they might want to. You managed to actually move $14 billion in cash that day, spread across 11 organizations willing and legally able to accept immediate lump sums, but the other $36 billion of your pledge sits unfulfilled, promised but not spent. And promised money, you learn the hard way, does not count. Only spent money counts. In the same afternoon, almost as an afterthought, you buy a Gulfstream and 2 smaller jets for the foundation's logistics team, $310 million, and endow a hospital wing in your own name, $600 million, which turns out to require a groundbreaking ceremony you don't have time to attend. By the end of day 3, your real total sits at $63.1 billion. Panic changes your strategy entirely on the 4th day. You stop trying to buy things with due diligence attached and start trying to buy things instantly, at scale, regardless of whether the price makes sense. 40 more private jets in a single order on top of the ones from the day before. $1.9 billion, most of which you'll never fly. An entire private island chain in the Pacific for $3.2 billion from a family that's owned it for 4 generations. Closing the deal in 6 hours by agreeing to their full asking price without negotiating a single dollar down. 2 smaller islands off the coast of a country you have to look up. $890 million combined. Bought sight unseen through a broker who seems delighted to finally move inventory that's been listed for years. You commission the construction of an entirely new stadium, paid in full upfront, $2.9 billion, and separately buy a controlling interest in the construction company building it, $1.1 billion. So the same money is technically funding both sides of the deal. You buy every unsold unit in 6 luxury condo developments across 4 cities. Sight unseen, $8.7 billion in a single day. A spending spree so aggressive that local news outlets in 3 of the cities start running stories about the mysterious buyer distorting the entire regional real estate market. Somewhere in the middle of all this, you also buy a stake in a formula-adjacent racing team, mostly because the owner happens to be at the same closing dinner as one of your other deals, $740 million, and a small chain of regional newspapers nobody else wanted, $210 million, which your lawyer calls an interesting choice and doesn't elaborate on. By midnight, you've spent $94.8 billion in that single day, your best day yet. Your 7-day total is $205.8 billion. You are roughly 20% of the way to $1 trillion with 3 days left, and the easy purchases, the ones that don't require weeks of paperwork, are starting to run out. The 5th day is the wall. This is the day the math stops being a math problem and starts being a psychological one. You've bought companies, real estate, art, entire fleets of vehicles, and you're still nowhere close, because it turns out the physical world simply does not contain enough instantly transactable, appropriately priced things for one person to buy in a 5-day window without either overpaying wildly or waiting on approvals you don't have time for. You try something different. You start structuring massive one-time cash bonuses for the employees of companies you've acquired. A move that's instant, unconditional, legally simple. You distribute $6.4 billion in bonuses across roughly 40,000 employees in a single afternoon, an average of $160,000 each. Life-changing money delivered by wire transfer with no strings attached. In the same stretch, on your lawyer's suggestion, You fund an entire endowed chair program across 9 state universities, $1.2 billion, and quietly buy a controlling stake in a domestic think tank focused on trade policy, $450 million. The kind of purchase that doesn't move headlines but buys you a standing invitation to rooms most people never get near. Dinners with undersecretaries and visiting delegations, influence with no clear price tag attached to it, because influence was never supposed to be for sale in the first place. It barely moves the needle against the total. That night, alone, staring at a spreadsheet that no longer makes sense no matter how you rearrange it, you think about calling Marcus again. You don't. You're not sure what you'd even say, and some part of you doesn't want him anywhere near whatever this actually is. The 6th day is desperation math. You attempt to buy an entire professional sports league's broadcasting rights outright, $22 billion, only to learn the negotiation alone, even at maximum urgency, will take longer than the time you have left. You try to buy physical gold bullion at a scale large enough to matter, only to discover that moving that much physical gold in days rather than months is a logistics problem no amount of money can fully solve. You buy a mid-sized shipbuilder, $3.4 billion. An art collection liquidated from a private European estate, $780 million. 11 more supercars you don't remember choosing because you've stopped personally looking at what you're buying by this point. And, through a fixer, your lawyer connects you with at 1 a.m., you fund the construction of a new wing on your country's diplomatic mission to the UN. A $600 million donation structured as a public-private infrastructure gift. The kind of thing that gets your name etched into a cornerstone and gets your calls returned by people whose calls used to never get returned by anyone. You spend $31 billion clearing out an entire national reserve of a smaller country's sovereign debt. An unusual transaction your lawyer structures at 2 a.m. that actually works cleanly. The single largest single-day movement of the week. By the end of the 6th day, exhausted, having barely slept in 72 hours, your running total sits at $431.6 billion. You are less than halfway there, with roughly 18 hours left on the clock, and a debt clause sitting at the bottom of a contract you still can't find a matching legal record for anywhere. The final 18 hours, you spend doing something you didn't expect to be doing when this started. Not buying things, but moving money as fast as legally possible into structures designed purely for speed rather than value. Lump sum, irrevocable trusts for strangers, nominated by a foundation you set up 2 days earlier. Instant, no conditions grants to municipal governments willing to accept same-day wires for infrastructure they've been trying to fund for a decade. A final $40 billion payment to clear the medical debt of every patient currently in collections across an entire state's hospital system. Verified and executed in 11 frantic hours by a team of lawyers you're paying 7 figures an hour to work through the night. You're alone for all of it. No one sitting across from you. No one to hand the phone to when your voice gives out. At the 1-hour mark, your running total sits at $971.2 billion. You are $28.8 billion short, and there is nothing left instantly purchasable. Nothing left structurally simple enough to move that fast. No amount of desperation left to spend against. The clock runs out. There's no explosion, no alarm, no voice on the other end of a phone telling you what happens next. The lights in the private banking suite flicker once, the way lights do during a normal power fluctuation, and in the space of that flicker, you're simply not there anymore. Not dead, not visibly harmed. Gone, the way a name disappears from a guest list, the way a reservation that was never actually confirmed quietly stops existing. The $28.8 billion doesn't convert into a number on a page. It converts into an absence. Into you. No one finds a body because there isn't one to find. Your accounts close out cleanly, without incident, as if they were always meant to. The tower in Miami, the island chain, the racing team, the newspapers, all of it changes hands again within a year. Purchased by buyers with names nobody bothers to check against the previous owner. The lawyers who worked through your final 11 frantic hours are paid in full, on time, and when anyone tries to reach the firm afterward, the number's disconnected. The office address belongs to a different tenant, and nobody remembers hiring anyone at all. Marcus spends the first few months after you go missing calling everyone he can think of. Police, who find no financial record of a $1 trillion account ever existing under your name, only the money you'd always actually had, which was never very much. Old co-workers who remember you leaving for a work trip and just never coming back. He tells the story to a detective once, the whole thing, the lawyer, the account, the 7 days, and watches the detective's expression settle into the specific, practiced patience of someone humoring a grieving friend. Eventually, Marcus stops telling it. Not because he stops believing it. Because there's nowhere left to put it. 2 years later, Marcus is closing out his register at the strip mall office, same as always, when a man in a gray suit knocks on the glass door after hours. Marcus almost doesn't let him in. Something about the man's face is hard to hold on to. The kind of face you forget the shape of even while you're looking directly at it. The man says he has an opportunity for someone with Marcus's particular temperament. Careful, skeptical, the kind of person who reads contracts twice and still calls a friend before signing anything. He sets an envelope on the counter and says Marcus doesn't have to decide tonight. Marcus doesn't open it right away. He sits alone in the dark office for a long time after the man leaves, looking at the envelope, thinking about a phone call he got 2 years ago, and a sentence he said that he still isn't sure he believes anymore. You can't actually spend that. Not for real. Not in 7 days. He picks up the envelope. He doesn't open it. Not yet.